So I bought a porta-band. Then of course I wanted a porta-band table. I needed a porta-band table. The saw needed a table. I mean, seeing it lay around all day, only moving to realign itself with the sunspot, that started to make me bummed. And to make my bum even bummer, turns out porta-band tables are expensive. Now there were several YouTube videos where somebody would show how they built their table, but they seemed to gloss over some of the important details, some of the things that I had questions about, like, is the blade perpendicular to the table? That's important. How easily can the saw be put in and be taken out of the table? How easily can it return to porta-band status so it can be used as a porta-band once you remove it? Is it a few seconds, a few minutes? Does it require tools? Is the saw modified? Are there parts you got to reattach? So I found these to be important aspects that weren't really covered very well in the videos that I saw. So I decided to set out on my own and just build a basic box out of wood as a prototype and then try and figure out the rest of it. So the focus of this video is to address those questions, mainly centered around like how to attach the saw to a table. I'm not going to show you how to build a table. I'm not going to show you how to use the saw. I'm just going to show you what I did to mount the saw to the table and cover 4 basic ideas. They're kind of sloppy right now, but they work well. And so I'm going to show you those 4 basic things and maybe give you a jump start on building your own table. Number 1, the guide rails that help the saw go in a predictable spot each time. Number 2, the front clamp, which clamps the front. Number 3, the rear clamp, which clamps the rear. And number 4, the mechanism that holds the trigger down. Number 1, the guides. Now the concept here is that these should prohibit your saw from going left or right, side to side. That way you can put in the saw and it always goes into the same sort of channel. What I did here to mount these, first I just shimmed up the saw up against the bottom of the top and then wood strips, CA glued the strips on, then took the saw out, pre-drilled the wood strips and screwed them in. And so that made a strong connection there that guides the saw in without going side to side. Number 2, this front screw clamp actually serves a dual purpose. It serves as both a mount to clamp the saw to the table, but also a stop to make sure that the saw lands in the same spot every time you slide it in and mount it. So the idea is you unscrew it. It should be unscrewed since the last time you used it. Then you slide the saw in until it stops against the threaded part. Then you screw the thing in and your saw should be now in the same spot every time you mount it between this and those guide rails. It should be very predictable. You can use any reference lines that you drew on top again, and you should be able to count on this now. So the parts I used for this were a 1/4 inch T-nut, a 1/4 inch bolt, some washers to sort of spread the clamping area, and then a little eyelet loop thing that I welded to the head of the bolt. That way I can just use it as more of a thumb screw. I mean, you can buy more elegant things than this, but this works. Now the rear clamp is also dual purpose. It handles both the support of the saw, in fact the majority of the weight of the saw, as well as the squaring of the blade actually. Now steps 2 and 3 really rely on this plate here being aligned properly from the factory. I mean, it needs to be square. I made that assumption with my saw and it worked. If your saw doesn't have a plate that's aligned properly or isn't squared up with the blade, you got to figure out that part. But I think it's safe to say that on most of our porta-bands, that plate is going to be a reliable reference point, a reliable reference surface for us to base the build and the clamping of this sort of contraption here. So step 3 really takes advantage of this squareness or flatness by smashing that plate up to the table. And so once that happens, then the blade instantly becomes 90 degrees perpendicular to the table very easily. Now I say easily, but that probably depends on your saw. I mean, on this saw there's a flat spot that is a really natural clamping spot to draw the plate and the table together. Yours might be different, you might have to be more creative, but hey, that's your problem, not mine. So take a look at your saw, try and find a way to clamp that in a sturdy spot that can draw the plate, just smash that plate against the table. Now one extra step I did here was to create a block that will protect the paint of the saw and also move my clamping area over just a little bit in order to bring both parts of that table together instead of letting one side of that cut sag. But honestly, I'm not sure how necessary that is because the point where that sag would be occurring is well past where the blade's going to be cutting, and I don't think it's really going to have an impact on on your cut. So anyway, yeah, I don't think it's that important. All right, now the fourth and final idea is simply a way of keeping the throttle pulled as you're using the saw. So what I used was just a simple spring clamp. I figured it was a little temporary thing for now, but it has worked really well. To turn the saw off, I just knock it backwards or pull it off. Now if you have a corded saw, you might as well just hook it up to a switch or something, some sort of safety switch that's right there in front of you. That concludes my list of really unelegant ideas for mounting a saw to a table. I do hope you build something nicer, but if you don't, and if you make something that's just kind of like this, from experience, I think you'll be totally happy. If you have any ideas, post them in the comments. I'd love to hear. Thanks.